Here we go. It is Sunday, January 17th, and this is Blue Star Media podcast number 43. I'd like to thank everybody who's come over to YouTube to watch these because, as I mentioned about having problems with Periscope, I said there was an issue, and I guess a few weeks later, they announced that they're going to discontinue servicing Periscope because they don't want to update the software. So, as sadly, I had to predict that. I said there were issues, and now it's where's the best place to go? And YouTube seems to be the place where we're going to house all these, and in the coming weeks, we're going to do some more new formats, etc. But this will be a short one. A lot of interesting news. I was going to try to do this yesterday, and I got a fury of phone calls and texts. I was out doing some meetings with people, and sadly, I'll lead off with the sad news is that I learned that John Rhodes, the former mayor down there in Myrtle Beach, great guy who I sat with at the McDonald's All-American games, myself, Morgan, him, Sonny Hill, were all there. And sad to say now that Morgan's gone in the spring, and now John Rhodes. John Rhodes is a victim of COVID, and it's a very sad passing because, the last 2 years, or last year there was no McDonald's game. Nobody's expecting one this year because of COVID, and who knows how that's going to be revamped because the news I'm about to talk about. I think we're now coming to an end of the normal postseason high school type games because who knows what postseason is. And once you open the door, I can't see it shutting back. And I'll go over some of the things. But first of all, sad on hearing the passing of John Rhodes. And to add to that, if people weren't aware, the head of the AAU, Roger Gowdy, passed away over a month ago due to COVID. And P.K. Martin, a long-standing guy in AAU, men's and women's basketball, from Philadelphia. He was in the middle of the Potomac Valley, which is the Washington, D.C. area. He also became a victim of COVID. So sad to see all those people pass. Now, let's get to the news of what's going on in basketball. And this is going to be a non-NIL, well, I guess a little bit, but this is more about high school girls basketball and how top players are now skipping high school due to COVID and going right to college because they gave them an extra year. It was brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I know Olivia Miles, who played for the Philly Bells, who was a USA member. She went today to Notre Dame. A couple of days before that, Sarah Poffenbarger, also a member of the USA U16 team 2 years ago. She just left for UConn. And just so you know, I through texting with some people, I found out that AZFA will not be joining. And Amari Dabari will not be joining, and neither will Caroline Ducharme. So that makes Saylor up at UConn the 12th player in the roster and the 7th freshman, which is going to be intriguing because when you get those 4 freshmen in, they're still freshmen. So they have basically 11 freshmen next year again. And you have 15 on your roster. So they're either going to be very young, going to be playing a lot of basketball because they're not going early to the pros unless that happens over the next 3 to 4 years, or they're going to change the dynamic for people to go overseas, women, and play early. So what does this all mean? Well, I think it all started with Dominique Darius, who left Blair Academy maybe back in December, joined UCLA, played for Corey Close, great person, great coach. And it was like kind of curious. It was like, oh, wow, okay. She goes and she's been there and played 3 games already. And all of a sudden, everybody's looking around and say, well, Corey's, if there's anything, if you don't know Corey Close, she is a game changer type of person and very proactive and has been in the game. She gets it. And I guess she'll ruffle feathers because people hate change, and she's creating change. By her doing this, it opened the door for others to think about it. And then you have Katie Borowitz going to Minnesota. That's number two. Then Madison Connor, 5'11", going to joining Arizona. And then Talia Van Hoffelen, she's up there in the Northwest. She goes and joins Oregon State. So those were three, and all of a sudden, then you got Seller Poffenbarger and Olivia Miles. So now you've got six players, six elite girls, well, six top girls basketball players. But of the six, there are three really big names. Olivia Miles being number one. She's the biggest name out there. AZ Fudd's number one. Let's not confuse anybody or confuse anything. But if you start to go down the list, Olivia Miles is the big name that's going to college early, and she gets another year. Seller Poffenbarger, she goes to UConn. Is that as big an impact? Probably not. I think the second most impactful player going was Dominique Darius. Is she going to help them win? No, but she's going to be that nice, valuable sub. Van Hoffelen, she's a very good guard, and she committed, and she's, she'll probably go in over there and play at Oregon State pretty fast. What's this all mean? Six players gone, two of them USA players. Now let's also add that Lauren Betts, London Jones, Kiki Rice, they're the underclassmen. They're the 22s that were on that USA team. And obviously of the three underclassmen, Lauren Betts just committed to Stanford, which is a big get because she's the first big name to sign the 22 classes, and some other people have committed. And I expect that usually that happened in April, and we'll probably see people deciding earlier. So let's go back. Will more 21s go to college early? It depends if they want that experience or not. The thing is, they get an extra year. It also tells you about, are they going to have a high school season? Are they not going to have a high school season? Are they playing for states? Are they not going to play at all? In New Jersey, who knew what Blair was going to do? So now with Darius leaving Blair, now Olivia Miles, they went from a powerhouse team to an underclass team, and who knows? Normally, if you have a great high school team, you'll stay. And since they're a prep school, that's a different matter. But if these other high school players are leaving, it's usually because there's no peer pressure for them to stay because nobody's playing basketball. I went to a game last week, first game I went to all year, and I walked into the gym, just parents. I couldn't even get in because the player who asked me didn't even leave me a ticket, nor told me you had to have a ticket. But luckily, the AD let me stand at the door and watch, which is all I needed. And what was curious is that everybody was wearing a mask playing. On the bench, officials, players, parents, everybody in the gym was wearing a mask. And I said, wow, okay. And other states are not playing. North Carolina, I hear, is playing with masks. Other states, nobody knows, play with a mask, play without. And what's that all about? That tells you that there's a lot of up in the air about the class of 21, class of 22, playing high school basketball, mask and no mask, COVID vaccines, the recruiting process, spring and summer basketball, etc. And this is not going to be a long one because I don't want to keep it too long, but we'll go to the signing, the leaving early for college, etc. In the past, that was usually a purview of the boys' side. August 8, 2019, there was a big story out there about all the boys who are leaving high school early to go either to the G League or to go overseas and play. And they talked about LaMelo Ball and Emmanuel Mudelay and Brandon Jennings, R.J. Hampton. Ball and Hampton went to New Zealand to play. And they also talked about Darius, Baisley. Instead of going to college, he took a job at New Balance for $1 million. Well, obviously, if you're trying to beat the process, this is a way to do it. And if I'm not mistaken, before Kobe Bryant went to college, his father, Joe Bryant, who I watched play in high school at Bartram High in Southwest Philadelphia, he was a consultant for Adidas before Kobe finished high school. So when he went directly to the pros, obviously he signed with Adidas. Well, we all know that he eventually went to Nike, and he was always going to be the best at what he did. But the issue came down to is that that's a rare instance where now the NBA, seeing the collapse, the possible collapse of collegiate men's basketball, and now we're going to go into a story right after that. So if these players say, "Hey, academically, you're making me go to college, and I want to be somebody who works with my hands or my skills. I want to be a race car mechanic, and you're making me study English lit." Well, what's that phrase? Not everything is fit for everybody. And if you're playing sports, you need me to be fluent in Greek literature. People will tell you yes, people tell you no. That's up to parents, players, people to make that decision. But what that led to is that, if you remember correctly, for a lot of you older players or older parents, Prop 48, for those who don't know, there used to be you can't play unless you've met certain requirements. Well, nobody really cared, because when you were a freshman, you played on the freshman team. Well, what they found out is that, wait a minute, I can move you up to the varsity immediately, like high school has, and play you immediately and not waste a year and have 4 years of you instead of 3 because you're a star. Well, then they said, okay, we'll let the freshmen play. But then the academic people got upset and said, well, you're cutting the line for just people who are in athletics. You're using them as gladiators and entertainers, and you're really cheating them as people academically. They said, okay, how can we come up with a solution? They came up with the solution of Prop 48. So now you had to have an SAT score and a grade point average. And if you didn't make it, you were a Prop 48. And if you made it, you weren't a Prop 48. So they lessened the academic standards to get these, athletically gifted people into collegiate sports faster, so that those sports teams could do better. Now, if you follow some of the rhetoric, it's like the coaches benefit, the schools benefited. Great, as I said before, maybe a few podcasts ago, great story in the Washington Post, how black athletes basically funded a lot of buildings and sports buildings within collegiate athletics. And you can read that story and make your own determination. Well, they benefited. And so now if you haven't noticed, a lot of schools are now dropping the SAT score. Some of them are even dropping the grade requirement score. So then you used to go to places like Harvard and the Ivies and others who would have such standards where, only the elite of the elite academics could make it. And then they had to create a curve to allow those who couldn't meet those standards to create diversity of look and viewpoint, but not of academics. That's another discussion for other people to have. It's not here. Bottom line is, we deal with sports, and the sports segment part of it is that it's now opened the door for more schools to get those premier athletes in the door. Why? Because collegiate athletics makes money. And if you've been following it, here we go, NIL and the Alston case, they're now saying we want to get paid for what we bring, and that's going to be determined. But what's intriguing is that there was a story today out there on one of the websites talking about the historically black universities now are claiming that years and years of discrimination because they're members of the NCAA, but they also put on them, here's the academic standards you have if you're going to play sports or you're going to have sports teams that matter. They have to have 50% graduation rates. Well, obviously, if they're taking players from disadvantaged academic educational backgrounds and they are playing here. Well, those who were academically good enough were recruited by the big institutions in the Power Five, which goes back into the narrative again of like, I think there was a top boys basketball player said, I'm going to a historically black university this year. And on my last podcast, I mentioned that Black Lives Matter raised $10.6 billion. Why aren't they funding all these track programs that is predominantly African American or overseas Africans? Why aren't they funding these programs? Take that money and fund them. With $10.6 billion, you know how much change? You know what? That money should have went to HBCUs. Forget all the complainers. Make change. The change of the future is based on academic opportunity. So with all that money, here's an opportunity to change the lives of the underclass who was out there in the summer, going out there, making their voice known in some people's minds. You can take another viewpoint in other people's minds of what they're out there doing. But the bottom line is resources are there to change the narrative. And I hope that happens. But the HBCUs claiming that, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's wonderful. But here's the question. What's the solution? Money wants to follow money. So I don't know if the people who got the 10.6 billion are going to really do something with it unless it helps themselves. And those are usually the people banging the drum, not the people following the drum. I hope something happens in that regard. I don't know. I guess I'll read about it or people will complain about it. I hope something happens. It's a great chance to create change. But in terms of creating change for girls basketball, this year with the signing, early exit of 6 players, will this continue? I got to believe in the next few weeks it will continue. But by the time we reach the end of January, I think it'll be over. Here's the reason why. If you followed most of the college stuff with COVID, they sent a lot of the school people sent their normal students home back right after Thanksgiving, some beginning of December. And they said you can go home for the holidays because of COVID concerns. Well, now they're all coming back from college. A lot of schools who used to go back January 2nd, 3rd said, no, don't come back to the 15th. Oh, what do we have? We're in the 17th. So guess what? Now we're getting that timeline where everybody is, quote, going back to college, or at least those who feel like going back who are not going to go distant learning. Well, a lot of the teams are also starting to gear up for their, quote, conference games if they can get them done. And a lot of schools, a lot of programs are, still canceling games. Now, if I haven't mentioned it, I thought it was brilliant by Carol Lawson to basically get out of Duke's women's season because, being a new coach, not knowing the talent, having a chance to get a year of recruiting updates, get recruiting done. I thought it was brilliant. What's funny is that the University of Virginia, after a bunch of games, all of a sudden cancels, and it was like, everybody's like, why'd they do that? And you could say, is it apples and oranges? Some people say it's apples and apples, and I was like, no, that's apples and oranges, because the coach of Virginia basically abandoned ship, and that's the street term. And like I said, I think was it San Jose or Santa Clara? One of them has also said that their season's over. So don't yell at me if I don't have the right Santa, except Claus. So if schools are going to continue, we may have some more in the next couple of weeks saying that they're going to not finish their season out. The Ivies are already opted out of the women's tournament. And right now, June 17, between now and 30 days, a lot of what's going to happen over the next 3 to 4 months is going to become apparent. And if you looked at months ago, I would have said, hey, I'm one of the first on board to see we're going to get some fast, we're going to get back to it. I doubt it. And to finish this up, I think we're going to have a situation where 21s who can get out and go early will go. Those who don't, it'll create opportunity for people to say, hey, I need to make sure that, I commit as fast as possible in the 22 class, because those 21s, as I just said, UConn's going to have 7 with 3 more freshmen coming in. They'll have 10 freshmen. Okay. Sailor 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 10 freshmen next year. 10, there's only 5 playing. And what happened to the upperclassmen? This is going to be the dilemma for basketball. And if you think transfer rule, which they didn't vote on, that's going to come up because that will be an issue. And also, let's get to this. Any person who's going now is going to get 4.5 years of college because they get the whole year. They're really getting half a year. How can I be the class of 22 say, well, when I get to January, I want to go to college? Well, you're not getting an extra year. Well, no, I don't want a whole year. I'll take the half a year. Thank you very much. So the college coaches are going to have a dilemma on their hands because they're going to have to vote in 4.5 years for any graduating early senior, which means that a lot of the top players are going to college early. And if you think about it, that means all those kids who, quote, sat around waiting for the All-American games, which haven't been run last year and will not be run this year. And do we really need a high school American game for what? They were on the preseason list. Oh, it's a postseason award for what? I'd rather go to college. And so what is it? Postseason games are for the leftovers? That'll be up for people to decide over the next year. And that'll be a fun discussion on a lot of media, well, here and other media sites over the coming months because there's, a lot of the all-star teams, a lot of the all-star games were now, and lists were now, if you pay, you get on the list. And I will stand by that statement. If you pay people, you get selected. And that's how it goes. So the whole system is now out of whack with the reality of the game. So wait a minute, if I'm not going to be an all-star game, I don't have to pay. So I guess I don't have to bother with that stuff because I don't care. And that really tells you what's going on with the change in basketball society. I want to, as for the summer, I think we're going to find out in the next 30, 45 days. I guarantee by the end of February, everything's going to be laid out for March, April, May, June. Now, I hold back on July because there's still discussions about that. But everybody, no matter what happens, if it opens, everybody's going to have to wear a mask every time, every minute, no matter what, because who's left? And everybody, so who's going to be that person to sit there and say, oh, in July, I got COVID because I was at your event or somebody else's event, and they caught COVID, and I'm blaming them because they didn't have any health protocols. Health protocols are not going away. They're not going away for quite a while. Everybody's now telling me, look for the fall to when things start to get figured out. I said, why is that? And they said, because they're waiting for the strain of the virus to switch again and again and again. We already have more strains coming out. And as you remember, as you take a flu shot, the flu shot changes every year. Well, COVID is now starting to morph. And will that shot that you take in April, May be good for September, October? Everything's up in the air. I used to be Mr. Positive. I am very optimistic that we will get a way to play, whether coaches are there or not. And if I'm an administrator, I'm saying to myself, my coaches need to go out and spend money for their ego or because they're bored. You can have official visits or unofficial visits on your campus as long as there's a protocol to bring people in with no COVID. I think at the end, it's going to be, number one, get athletes back on campus. Number two, get students back on campus. And I will keep repeating this because all you parents who have kids who are playing right now in high school don't want to hear it. But if those two things don't happen, college is cooked. Besides the fact, make sure you watch this. The NCAA must, no matter what, have the NCAA men's tournament, even if it's 16 to 32 teams. Nobody cares. They've got to get the TV revenue and that money, even if it's half. They've got to get it. Otherwise, they can't run. They can't support themselves, which opens up a whole can of worms about how the NCAA is contemplating, I'll say the word contemplating, dipping into the administration of high school and youth sports. So I would like to, we'll go more into that as we go through. This is longer than I wanted. and I wanted to try to keep these around 20 minutes. So I thank everybody from watching, and we'll be back here in a few more days with the latest stuff going on in basketball.